Hey there, internet friends. Welcome to another episode of That Nerdy Site Show, a weekly podcast where the team members from That Nerdy Site get together to talk about our lives and all of the nerdy things we love about them. I'm your host, Trevor Starkey, and joining me once again, Cameron Abbott. How you doing, Cam?
Hey, what's going on, everybody?
What's going on is this will be our last week talking about Dragon Age the Veilguard, at least until Game of the Year stuff comes up here in a month and change. Cameron has finished the game, so we're going to do Cameron's review, spoiler-free first. Then we'll go kind of, the bulk of this episode is going to be our spoiler cast on Dragon Age the Veilguard, after, tiptoeing around some things the last couple weeks. And then if we have time at the end, stay tuned for time codes. I also have a Wicked review, as well as I finished Life is Strange Double Exposure this week. So stay tuned. If we end up chatting about those, they'll be in the time codes at the end of the episode. If you like what you hear, please remember to like, subscribe, rate, review, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. So, spoiler-free first, Cam, as we so often do. Mm-hmm. Where did you come down on Dragon Age the Veilguard? This is a game, obviously, as we've talked about, you were not really planning on, and then I convinced you / let you borrow my copy for the last couple weeks, and you engulfed the game. So, so where are you at on this one?
Where I'm at on it, I'm going to let you know my review score up front. My review on this one is it's an 8.
Okay.
It really was teetering towards the 8.5 to 9 range up until kind of like the last few things of the game, like chipped away at it. And this is not to be like, oh, the ending's bad or anything, but like there's a lot that I feel about the way they decided to end the game, mm-hmm. and particularly the ending, like the stuff at the very end of the game, that I felt was extremely lackluster and did not deliver, based on the choices that you make in the game.
We'll talk in spoiler-filled stuff. I know one thing in particular that we already talked about that you're like, I'm mad I didn't get to do this.
Yep. But this is even past that point. Sure. This is like literally the very end of the game, after you finish playing it. But it's between that and also all of the like small little things throughout the game that like kind of chipped away at its score for me, that brought me back down to an 8. Like I'm still like it's, on another day it could be an 8.5.
8 is a great game. I think when we did my review a couple weeks ago, I think I was somewhere between 8 and 8.5 as well. Yeah. So sounds about right in terms of where I would expect this to fall for you. So yeah, any spoiler-free elaboration on that?
Sure.
In terms of like
combat,
the lore that I mm-hmm. was the thing that I knew I tricked you into playing for.
You did a little Fenharel yourself, getting me to play this game. As somebody who is a massive fan of the first and even second Dragon Age game, the first Dragon Age Origins to me is like a 10 out of 10 perfect game, especially with the Awakening DLCs and all the other DLCs that come with it. And it sets up and creates a world, which also, the fact that David Gator is now on Blue Sky, by the way, and has been like talking about his like writing process for some of the best characters that he's ever done, has been like very insightful and very cool to see, as somebody who loves the original game so much. But to see very much a fulfillment of a lot of the lore promises and a lot of the lore mysteries from the original game that are kind of like brought to the forefront and fulfilled in a really meaningful way. As a lore nerd, this took that was such a big thing for me. A lot of this game for me came down to how does this new team, where like none of the people on this team were part of the team. I think, I don't know. Jennifer Halper might still be on the team. I'm not sure if she is or not, but I don't recall seeing her name in the credits. But like, if anybody from the original team is there, it's not like they're not prevalent in what I was seeing. This is a new group of people. Like, this is the BioWare new class coming in. And these are the people that worked on Anthem. These are the people who worked on Mass Effect Andromeda. And they're really sinking their teeth into it. And one, I could tell their passion for the Dragon Age universe. There's a deep love of the lore in this game. And a deep love of like, we can't wait to tell you more about this stuff and like make the turns and the reveals for it. And so for a lore nerd like me, it was a massive, massive boon to like have that experience in this game. I'm a total codex nut. Like, so all the little things you find, all the little like note pieces, like I will stop in the middle of a run of doing anything if I pick up a lore piece. And getting that sort of like filled out was such a massive, cool thing to see. The way they broke it up a little bit was a little frustrating. The fact that it was like faction based and the cross faction stuff was not in its own section. And so all of a sudden you have like something about Kunari in like the elf section, stuff like that. Like codexes could have been organized a little bit better, I feel, but overall, like stellar work immersing this game, like bringing an immersion to the universe of Dragon Age in this game in a way that I felt like really impacted and really mattered, which to me is so important because I felt a lot lack of that on Inquisition. And the fact that they kind of like came full circle on a lot of stuff that they even introduced in Inquisition was really cool and awesome as well. The biggest knock against this game is that, and if this is not necessarily like a knock against the development team, it's just kind of like a knock against how these games have played out. The world state was such a big deal for Dragon Age Inquisition, importing all these major choices over. Opening it up, there's only like 4 choices that matter from previous games, and they're all from Inquisition. Which leaves like a couple things that they confirmed already through codexes that like are like firm choices that they're sticking to from the original, like the first 2 games, but that are really cool and impactful that I felt. But overall, the lack of having the open-endedness of a lot of choices in the original game, like Origins and Awakening are like so many choices that are important to what kind of world state you have in 3.
It's Schrodinger's status.
Yeah. Schrodinger's status. There you go.
Is what this game is because of the lack of like carryover from the past.
Yeah.
It's like, it could be one thing or the other.
Yep.
Who knows?
We're
not going to tell.
Well, for me, I feel like it's less of like, we're not going to tell, and more of like we know how crucial how important these choices were to you. We're not touching those choices. So we're not going to like try to impede on that. And I respect that. I have a lot of respect for this team who were not part of like the Origins team coming into this and like really making their stamp on it. Like really being like, hey, how are we going to define elves in this game? How are we going to define, especially with like the stuff that elves have to deal with in this game, and the elves have to deal with in Thedas in general? How are we going to deal with the Kunari? Because in some supplemental stuff between Inquisition and Veilguard, the Kunari have gone through a massive shift and a massive change. I talked about it a little bit like on the last episode about it. It's really cool stuff to move the world of Thedas forward. And that's the thing I appreciate. The way they've moved it forward. They're like, we can't be tied to this plethora of decisions in the past. We have to be able to move forward. And I respect that. I think that's great. I think the fact that they jumped it 10 years from Inquisition gives it that time to breathe. Gives it that time to be like, yeah, things have changed. Like, and I think they nail on the way of it's like, oh, if the world's ending, it's not just like in one place the world's ending. The world's ending all over the place. And how does that, what are the logistics of that? And what is the logistics of your hyper-specialized team that has been put together to take on a very particular task that is the most important task, but you guys have to do it on your own with the factions that you ally with and build, because you can't do that. Like the other, like hero of the previous game can't be here to help you because he or she, they are doing everything they can to handle things everywhere else. Like this is very much a like, I am leaving this task to you because you are the most capable to handle it, and I have to be everywhere else. And it works. Narratively, it works. It's very, very awesome to see a culmination of, a lot of lore and a lot of promises, a lot of like supplemental material, books, comics, etc., really come to the forefront in importance and really find their finalization. So people who have immersed themselves for years into the lore of Dragon Age really got a good kind of like next, like closing that chapter of it. Just stellar decisions on what the team did with that. I'm not the biggest fan of moving away from a lot of the strategy aspects of the previous games. I still feel, even after playing through Veilguard, Inquisition had a better combat system. I would have liked to see maybe some of these action-oriented things for the live battle be implemented as well into, like, maybe switching out some of the mechanics of the more action-oriented stuff that was a little stifling in Inquisition with what you get here, but leaving a lot of, like, the opportunities for, like, strategic, like, top-down decisions I feel like switching over to a top-down map in Inquisition to really plot out what kind of like how you want your strategy to go really mattered. Also, on top of that, companions being more like working more as a unit rather than assists, and having like more control over your allies in the previous game, I really enjoyed more. Sometimes while in the middle of a fight, I was so action oriented, I forgot I had teammates. Especially early on, the game just like does not give a good, like you can just say, hey, go fight this person. You can target, like there's targeting aspects of it that are fine and work well enough that I didn't feel like handicapped at any point in any of these fights. But the lack, especially I can't imagine playing this on a harder difficulty. And just the lack of strategic like mechanics in this game. It feels very much leaving behind the CRPG elements of Dragon Age 1 and Dragon Age Inquisition.
Oh yeah, this goes full action RPG.
Yeah, and it really has. And I feel like the depth of combat has issues because of it. Like I see like mages have a slow start because you are limited in your resources and spells and abilities. It's interesting. I'm playing through right now as a warrior right now, so we'll see where that ends up. But like I have a lot of like I liked the dagger orb mage much more for action playthroughs much more than staff.
Yeah.
Staff felt stifling and like the staff was my sniper rifle basically.
I mean, yeah, like the mage build being the one that I haven't, gone any kind of hands on strikes me as a like. I never liked playing mage in the other games anyway because it had a lack of action, or I had to be in the like pause mode so much more. Like I played mage across the other three games, but like rogue has I think always been my preference, followed by warrior. Then mage would be very far away at the bottom kind of thing because I just don't like, especially going through Inquisition recently again. Just the like, oh, I want to do this AoE thing, so I need to be very particular where I'm casting this. So I need to like pause everything, go into that strategy mode, and like drop it to get it in the spot that I want to. And that just like breaks up the flow of the game for me.
Okay.
In a way that I like just being able to let those other characters kind of do their thing and me just be in there and like smashing people with daggers or swords or whatever. And so going into this, it was a conscious choice of like, I'm not going to try and do a mage because I didn't know how that was going to play out in a much more action focused game. I'm like, am I going to have to be like trying to gauge, a shot of an ice bolt kind of, thing from, 20 feet away, or what's that going to look like? And so I was just like, I'm just going to keep it simple, stick with, a nice dagger rogue, and let the mages as my companions. I'll trigger them with the L1, R1 kind of prompts and stuff like that. I'm curious. I imagine, and it's not something I played around with at all because again, I was playing on like a easy difficulty. I wasn't going into this like I want the combat experience to be as hard as it can be or anything like that. But as a result, I was barely using even those L1 and R1s. But I imagine in some of the more like trick play things that I've seen in like in reels and stuff like that, it's getting really good and really familiar with the shortcuts and like mapping things to your up, left, and right and whatnot. And I was just like, I don't care enough to really get into that. But yeah, I saw like I even seen people being like, okay, I'm going to map all of like the ignition abilities that a person has on this button, and then I'm going to map all their detonation ones on this button, so that regardless of who I have mix and match with, I know I can just go to, okay, that's the button for ignition, that's the button for detonate, and do that in terms of like strategic play. I did not do that because I was just like, I much preferred freezing the game to then like strategize like, okay, where are people at? Where am I going to get the most bang for my buck on these detonations? And I
totally mapped out my party based on like ignition and detonations.
Yeah.
I very much early on abandoned my allies ever healing me, just so that I could get more party combos going. Just because it's like, I don't like that. Oh, if I need this, if I like for this quest, I need this one person here. I don't like that I only have like one, like maybe one or at most two options for that party to get a detonation out of it. And so dropping all of those to then just like let them be full combat focused gave me the much more flexibility.
How often or did you ever respec your characters? Because I feel like that probably also goes into like higher strategy.
Yes.
Is like, hey, for this section, I really need these people and I need them built out like this.
Yeah.
Versus, oh, I don't need that ability at all anymore, so I'm going to respec everything. I never bother with any of that. I didn't even I never respect the other characters. I just kind of like picked a lane and was like, all right, you're using that ability. Like I would find whatever their ignition and detonation abilities were, because those were the ones I was most likely to actually like engage with, just because I really only was worrying about like the combos of like, oh, this goes with that one. Okay, I'm gonna do that, and then I'm gonna do this, and boom. That gives me a little bit of breathing room to let my, meter build back up or whatever before I go in for another heavy attack or something.
Yep. The thing about mana is the way mana works differently than like energy or rage or whatever it is, because you start full and you don't build it up by combos or anything. It is like there is a lot that I think like strategy wise goes into it. One of the things I did early on was I was like, oh, well, I want Davrin or Tosh to have invulnerability for like when those tough moments come out. And then I learned later on, it's like invulnerability is useless. Cause like the chance that your party members are going to go down, non-existent, not a problem. So not worried about invulnerability. And so for Davrin, I heavily invested into Battle Cry for the taunt of it. Tosh, I did not do taunt with Tosh. I had them go full DPS, like heavy DPS mode. Really gave an emphasis on that. I think like I have a lot of thoughts. A lot of like my critiques are on like also some more aesthetic stuff, but
it just in terms of like combat and just kind of the gameplay flow. I remember again, one of those early criticisms you had before going hands on was like, I don't like that they're dropping the party down from 4 to 3 people.
Yep.
Was that as big of an issue as you thought it was going to be playing? Or?
An issue? No, because, and this is why, because your allies are borderline invulnerable, at least on normal, I was on normal difficulty, my allies were borderline invulnerable no matter what. So not having to manage their health meant I, like the fourth party member, which was usually like a supporter or healer of some kind in the previous Dragon Age games, moved over from that to, okay, I don't need to worry about supporting them. They're going to be on their own and fine. So it became less of an issue because of that. My concern running into it was like, well, what about support? Does that mean I have to play the support person? And then it's like, oh no, there's just, you can have your allies do like have a heal. Anybody can have like a heal. And I'm like, okay, I get that. And then later on, it's like, oh, you really don't, as long as you manage your own health and resources for yourself, fine. That's it.
Yeah.
And so the lack of like, and I will say ignition and detonation for, like those combo abilities, while a cool concept, the fact that the same effect always happens for the detonation, no matter what kind of application it is, just got to be like a thing I just kind of ignored while it was happening. I used it strategically the way it was supposed to be used, but like I was never wowed by any detonation. There was never a cool like combo, like, oh, this ability meets this ability and like it does like a cool thing. That never happened for me. Like I never felt that way. It was just kind of like oh, it's detonating. Okay, he's going to be slower. So I like if I'm about to, there's another thing too. If I'm about to like deflect the attack, well, I got to retime it out because he's moving slower now. Especially on big boss fights where it's like, okay, I'm doing the detonation, so I build up that like gray like meter on them for like how much health we're taking off in that moment because it, you apply extra damage during those moments.
Yeah.
But if they're already mid swing when I cast the detonation, okay, well, where am I going on that? Like, okay, do I have to like? So it messed up my blocking sometimes. on my parry, but which is, I'm saying that as I played mage. The knife orb combo is extremely good for people who want a faster close range pace as a mage. It is extremely good. One thing I didn't like was the way that the mage abilities were broken up as blast or strike abilities. So like I realized I was like, oh, well, they're wanting me to choose either to be a blast mage or a strike mage. Well, I'll just do strike mage because the abilities I like to use right now are strike ones. So I never ended up varying into the blast abilities. I changed out, like, I did not pick up any of the like additional spells because they are blast and I didn't care for that. So I had Fire Strike, which is like your first one you get as a mage. I got Lightning Bolt. And then I got Dagger Strike, which is you make a lightning dagger and you stab somebody with it. Which as a Spellblade is like the premier ability for that class, or for that subclass. Which is, it's awesome.
But like, I mean, like again, having replayed Inquisition recently, I had so many abilities in Inquisition that I just never used. It was like, okay, I've unlocked these because I have the skill points for them, but I like the abilities I like, and I'm gonna keep using those. If I wanted to like drastically change up my playstyle, sure, I could switch into whatever kind of the equivalent here of your strike versus blast, like it's the same option here. But I much preferred in this being like, okay, these are my abilities. This is the core kind of set that I'm going to really build, and I'm going to build the passives around that kind of stuff and strengthening and even the abilities. Like I was way more focused on, and maybe this is just because I was a rogue, but I was way more focused on just doing like the light and heavy attack combos and like worrying about that more so than like what my abilities could actually do or anything like that.
Your combos, especially until you get to the mid game, your combos as a mage are extremely limited. You only have, I think, the light to heavy, and then the charged versions of them. Like that's all you have.
I mean, but like even like I say combos, I wasn't even really actively thinking I'm going to do square, 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 triangle. I'm just like, I was just using a mix of light and heavy attacks. I was just doing the action combat rather than like focus on the ability stuff.
As a mage with your combos, when you get up to those, especially if you're going Spellblade, the greater differences in your combos means you can get more mana back. It means you add like one of the cooler things, and this is one of my favorite things that they did with this, is they gave you a passive ability where when you cause burning, it causes electrification. And if you cause electrification, it causes burning. So you get double DP, like double double damage over time. And that's awesome because that meant that I could have, this ability activates on burning, this ability activates on electrifying or whatever. It's a lot of cool stuff happened around that because I was so focused on strike magic, which is a cool benefit. But I did feel like, well, why am I going to pick up this other ability? It doesn't fit the flow of what I do.
Right. And so I think what I'm saying is I think I appreciate that the game has such a
focus,
deep, like maybe not deep, but like a wide bench of options for you on that. Like I can go in and not really worry too much about the abilities at all. You can get really focused on one type of abilities. Maybe there's somebody out there that really did like the burst abilities and they really kind of headed that direction in their skill tree and stuff like that. And I like that, and especially the like, hey, there's no cost if you want to just respec everything.
That I do like. That's awesome. I love the free refund ability on it. That aspect of it I loved as well. Also, I love the fact that you got extra skill points as you explored. That rewarding of exploration, extremely good.
Yeah.
Rewarding, I felt like there was a weird mix of like, you either were greatly rewarded for exploring spaces or you were not really rewarded at all for exploring some spaces. It was like a very feast or famine. It's like, oh, cool, I did all this. I moved over here and I got 12 gold. Or I moved over here and I got like a cool epic item and like Fenrir statue unlock and whatnot, like different stuff.
I mean, there's a mix of that as is so often the case. I felt, I mean, like, especially off of like Final Fantasy 16 last year, I thought one of the things that Final Fantasy 16 did terribly was that like, there's no reason to try and go off the beaten path because there's nothing at the end of that.
Yep.
In terms of like a rewarding treasure. This one had treasures or little satchels or something everywhere. Even if it was, just a handful of gold or something like that. It's still something that you've rewarded me with for trying to find every little nook and cranny of your little world.
It reminded me of Echoes of Wisdom from earlier this year.
Sure. Yeah.
A lot of that, like, cool, I got 5 rupees.
Yeah.
Neat.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, overall though, like, yeah, this is really what paints it as an 8 for me. This is if you are a fan of the Dragon Age games, this is a must play. You got it. Like, if you're a fan of the lore, a fan of the story, even if you were like, well, I don't really like that they're taking away a lot of the tactical stuff, I'm telling you, adapt to it as best you can. Play on the story mode where it's super easy to cheese your way through it. Don't worry about it. This is the lore you get, especially just the places you get to go. Because you're in Northern Thedas, and they really let you explore Northern Thedas. The Anderfels, Tevinter, Neurasis, Arluthan Forest, and like Treviso, which is in Ravane, the Ravani Coast even. Like, there are so many awesome places that like we've heard about as we've had games in Southern Thedas or in the Free Marches. But to actually get to explore these like legendary places makes it worthwhile, much less the lore you discover while you're in these places.
Yeah.
The lore, as you discover, there's more about elven history in this game than any other Dragon Age. So if you've ever been a fan of like the mystery of the elven like history and like the twist we got in Inquisition about elven history and their relationship with their gods, all of that comes to a forefront here, especially as elves have to reckon with, these are our gods that you're fighting.
Yeah.
Like, there is something weirdly, deeply personal. I played an elf, and so like, and I know for a fact, like, I have no doubt that if you're playing other races, there's a good chance that it's like when you're talking to Davrin or Balara, you mention your gods instead of our gods. Mm-hmm. There's always an emphasis when I was playing my elf, not half elf, my elf, that when he mentions our gods, it's like, I'm taking like, this is partially like a responsibility of the elves. Like, we have to handle our gods. And the ties of like, if you're like wondering about what are the ties between the archdemons and the high dragons of Tevinter and the elven gods, and like, what's the weird kind of symbolic or like symbiotic weird relationship between them, like all of that answered, and in a really brilliant way too. Like, everything gets answered in such a cool way. I cannot recommend it enough if you're a lore fan. Even if you've like fallen off the lore, like I did post Inquisition, they do a really great job of catching you up on like what's been happening in the world. And it's awesome as hell. So yeah, an 8 out of 10. Negatives aside, this is a great game. That great game. Check it out. I think it's worth buy.
Excellent. Yeah, it's pretty much as somebody way less invested in the lore, but like I enjoy the story enough, and I enjoy like the world building of the Dragon Age games, even if I don't read every codex or have forgotten when I did read every codex back in like Dragon Age Origins, and had that much more time to just kind of like nerd out about that kind of stuff.
I definitely added like an extra 15 hours to my gameplay time reading all the lore.
Yeah, ton of fun on this one. So yeah, with that, let's dive into our full spoiler stuff. So last chance to duck away. If you have not finished the game yourself, feel free to go do that. Come back and enjoy our spoilery chats. Because I know some of the things Cameron and I have already talked about kind of off microphone are just, the fun spoilery things. So go ahead, duck away. If we do get to the Wicked review and Life is Strange Double Exposure, you can find the time codes for those at the end. Otherwise, have a great weekend. Have a happy Thanksgiving. So yes, diving into full spoilers. I want to start with just kind of a recap of like what you played as, what I played as. So I was a crow, Antivan crow, elf.
Nice.
As well, female elf, voiced by Erika Ishii. Shout out Erika Ishii. And my like carryover choices were like the Inquisitor wants to help Solus. Turned over the Inquisition to the Chantry. Wants to try and redeem Solus. And that's pretty much where I think my kind of base level coming in was. And as I said, a rogue. And you, I believe, were kind of the... I feel like the Antivan Crows and the Shadow Dragons are like the two most common things that people are playing as, or maybe Grey Wardens, I don't know. But at least like in terms of your early game stuff, those are a couple of the factions that are like the big factions, and certainly one of the biggest choices in the game of like, are you going to help Minrathous? Are you going to help Treviso? Are innately tied to those factions and those associated party members. So you were a Shadow Dragon.
Yep.
Said Elf,
Mage. Yep. Shadow Dragon, Elf, Mage. My Inquisitor was a Melkunari who disbanded the Inquisition officially, and then made the decision that Solus had to be stopped.
Gotcha.
Which ended up playing out very interestingly because of the way that the decision I made with Solus at the end of the game.
Sure.
Like that was a very unique moment.
And you romanced Bellara,
right? Yep.
I romanced Nev. Trying to think. So in terms of big choices, we both picked Treviso, or we both picked Minrathous to save. So Treviso suffers.
Yes.
For the back half of our game. And I think the next big choice that we get comes way, way late in the game. Well, I guess, there's the big choice at like Weishaupt. Did you punch the Grey Warden or did you help him?
I helped him.
You helped him?
Yeah.
I punched him.
Yeah.
I knocked him out.
I felt like beheading like the head of like the chain of command in the middle of a siege, in the middle of like, even if he needs to like talking him down was a big help, especially later on in the Howler quest because he was there. He
helps you out in the Howler quest, which he did not. I had to fight him at some point later on. Like I fought a blighted version of him.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Which was like that was the like, here's the here you fucked around earlier. Here's you finding out.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Well, the trade-off was as we talked about off mic, like all of most of my party very much approved of me knocking him out.
Yep. My party disapproved of me not knocking him out.
The trade-off was I had to fight one other guy.
Yeah. I did not know that. Because the thing that came up, the like little like notifications, like you chose to talk him down, so he's here now. I just thought he wasn't going to be like he died at Weishaupt or something. I didn't know that he shows back up blighted. That's cool.
Yeah. I mean, it's still in like the Howler stuff. It's basically just instead of he helps you out. In my case, and it may not have been that I was fighting him so much as he was there and blighted and couldn't help. So I probably had to face off some. It's been a few weeks since I did all this anyway myself. So
with the first warden, it was a matter of like when you talk him down, what you're actually doing. You're not like, "Hey, help me out," and he listens to you. It's like, "Hey, pay attention to yourself," like because you notice like. He's bleeding out from his ears. Like he's basically, they're forcing him into a calling state. And so he's freaking out. So he's like not mentally there. And you talking to him is actually like bringing him back down to like rationality. And it's like, it's a big deal for everybody to be like, for all the Grey Wardens to be like, oh, like for him to be like, I immediately after you do that and he realizes that he's not in the right head state. He immediately turns command over to Antoine and Antoine's wife. I forgot her name right now. I want to call her Olga for some reason.
Yeah, the Grey Warden couple.
Yeah, he turns it over to them to handle it, while he's going to then take a less logistical position because he doesn't think he can be trusted at this point. Like you get him to recognize you're being manipulated by the gods, and even if he's like, I still don't believe in the gods, but something is happening and it's wrong and there's an archdragon out there. And so he does a big moment where he talks to Davrin and says, Davrin, this is not your time. Like the warden still needs you. And he says like, I need to redeem myself. And that's when he goes in for the kill where then the Gillenane bursts out of her archdragon and then like catches him and like you think kills him and throws him into the river.
Yeah. And that's the thing is like that plays out pretty similarly, even if you knock him out.
Really?
Like he comes to and takes Davrin's place. So like that was the like when I was like playing through it and kind of trying to gauge like what's going to happen, what are my options, how are they going to play out? It was like in the immediate aftermath, nothing really. Like he's still going to come and he's still going to be the one trying to sacrifice himself against the archdemon.
Which is super cool because when Davrin does then kill the Archdemon and he doesn't die, there's a very cool moment where Gillenane realizes you're about to kill her Archdragon, and she pulls something back from the Archdragon. That is like one of the blighted sources that she manipulates throughout that Weishaupt that you see her like pouring into her Archdragon to like evolve it. She's adding these like blight sources to it to change it up. And so before Davrin can kill the Archdemon, she pulls that out of it. And so now I'm like, so I was expecting like maybe her Archdemon will come back in some way. Maybe it'll be a new Archdemon. And then for her, it's like, no, there's something about one, she couldn't find another High-Dragon.
Yeah, it's like I was not at all paying any attention to that because it still made her mortal, and it's still and the game plan of try and kill her still went off, and Lucanus misses, but he doesn't miss. He gets interrupted. Gillenane is able to like intercept him before he hits her. She like swings out a tentacle and it stops him. Yeah, basically like. And then it leads to like bickering of like if Lucanus had been more focused and not on had not been part demon, what are we like? And you get like the discord between Lucanus and Davrin.
Which I didn't like the conversation at the dinner table about the resolution, but I liked the communication you have as Rook talking to them, and both of them being like, I shouldn't have said that to Davrin, or I shouldn't have said that to Lucanus, like it's not his fault, like I'm just like and for Davrin it's like I should have died, like I don't know why I'm not dead, and I'm just not in the right headspace right now. Lucanus being like, no, he's right, like I am being distracted by spite, like I gotta do something about this to to deal with it. And so and for them to, I didn't like the kind of like, well, he's half demon but he's not half bad or whatever it was, like the kind of like cheesy dialogue there I didn't care for. But talking to them and both of them being adults and being like, I shouldn't have said that. I feel bad about it. I'm going to apologize to them later.
Yeah.
And then that's like a very cool, like that's how adults handle trouble in situations.
Yeah,
these are adults.
Yeah. We like things were heated in the heat of the moment. We said things that, in cooler minds, we realized, hey, no, it wasn't really your fault. Like we did everything we could. I really liked how the whole crew kind of like has those kinds of conversations when you do get like, okay, here's like, of course you can't have this disparate group of people be fully copacetic the entire time, whatever. So it makes sense to introduce those conflicts, but they're all still, they all still have the same end goal in mind. And so it's just a matter of, okay, let's take a step back. And no, I didn't really mean that. So apologies. And I like those little moments.
Getting to see these, I guess. Or go ahead.
I was just gonna say, in terms of like other big moments that are kind of the big spoilery things. And one of the places we did have a difference in nearing the end game when you send off either Davrin or Harding to be kind of the lead of the second team, and ultimately whoever you pick is going to be sacrificed, and they're not going to make it out.
They don't make it that clear in the moment.
Yeah, no, not at all. I picked Davrin, you picked Harding.
I picked Harding because of Harding made the better case. I feel like Harding said we need somebody quick who can get us in and out of there. Davrin is a sword and shield.
For me, it was a Davrin will do whatever it takes, and like he had already proven that he was ready to like give his life for the cause. And it didn't happen. So I was like, all right, let's give you another crack at this.
Yeah, for me, it was Harding's explanation. Like, we got to, like, getting into that armada and blowing it up is going to take somebody who can get us there quickly, in and then out to keep the team safe. And so when she shows back up with the rest of the group at the other end of the gate after you fight the Antom there in that stadium, is opening the gate up for you. It's like a moment of like, oh, cool. I definitely feel like I made the right choice on that one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Davrin shows up there with his team too. So it's like,
that doesn't change.
The illusion of choice. But yeah. We made.
Well, you end up like, I'm glad I didn't choose Davrin because like you lose a son too.
Yeah.
Like, no, thank you.
Yeah.
You told me that and I was like, I'm glad I made the choice I made.
They're a package deal. But by the time we had done that, I had already freed the rest of the Griffins, and I took them to Arlington Forest. What'd you do with the Griffins?
Oh, I gave them to the Wardens.
You gave them to the Wardens?
Yeah, the Wardens, I felt like there's a very copacetic kind of like, maybe I'm not using that word correctly, but the way that there is a symbolic, like the wardens are
the link.
Link.
There's the link. The other thing, just to talk on this real quick, in a spoiler fashion, the last time we talked about the griffins and stuff like that, you were like, "Here's my theory," and then like that night you got home and you were like, "And they just confirmed my theory."
Yep.
So
it was the same person, like I mentioned in our last episode. The Calling is an excellent book. It is about the end of the Griffins in the Grey Wardens and kind of like the clue about their preservation into the future. Getting to see that fully realized was awesome. Getting to see her, like, it's so sad because what the blight has turned her into, and her blight being so extra because she took the blight from the last of the Griffins, like the Griffin eggs. She made sure like to take any blight they had on them into herself to preserve them and keep them safe. It's also the eggs of her brother's Griffin. Her brother's Griffin mated with their like another character who was also her brother's girlfriend and lover. Gillenane, for people out there who know the lore, everybody knows Gillenane is an epic lover. There's a literal moment where like it's a fun note. And so Gillenane is like and he named his Griffin Crooky Tail because he's a dork.
Is it actually Gillenane? Because Gillenane,
not Gillenane. Sorry, no.
I was like, Gillenane's the big bad tentacle lady in this one.
Yeah, nope. Not an epic lover on that one. Oh, no. I think it's Gildrad or something like that. But that's his sister, who is the Howler, who is the blood mage of the Wardens, who under the orders of the first Warden blighted them, thinking that this might give us an edge, and it didn't, and it went really, really terribly, horribly wrong. And you see that here. When you went into the vault, and when you go into the vault and you see it,
all the
dead Griffins, all their bones, and the comment of like, they were blighted. Like this, and this is the thing. This is a real thing that happened to Griffins. Sometimes Griffins did get blighted by the blight and by Darkspawn.
You're saying this is a real thing that happened in Griffins, like you're talking in real history.
Sorry, I get that way with lore, man. So getting to see that kind of like
Anyway, I thought the Grey Wardens have been too decimated with Weishaupt and stuff like that, so I didn't think they had it in them to also try and like rebuild this order of Griffins.
Sure.
So I was like, let the Griffins go, be the protectors. There had been there's that little sequence where
with the Hala.
The Griffin kind of like, just innately protects the Hala and stuff like that. And I was like, okay, these should not be like conscripted soldiers. They should they're a wild beast. They should be out in the wilds. Yep. So that was where I felt. So ultimately, like when Davrin and Asan kind of go out, I was like, well, the Griffins will live on, and it's because of the choices that Davrin helped me make, kind of thing. So I like it was it's certainly a bummer, and that was I'm of two minds of I don't like that there's no way to like get out of this with everybody alive. I hate that kind of decision. At the same time, it's like, oh, that is innately going to be a much more memorable decision, because that's going to be your like Ashley versus Caden kind of choice of like who. But it is also, I also did not like that it's not clear that that's the choice you're making in the moment.
True.
Whereas
true
like in Ashley versus Caden, hey, you're going to save somebody in particular. It's like the Ashley Caden is much more the Treviso and Manrathis choice of this game. And so this was like a, pull the rug out from under you this first time playing through it of like, hey, whoever you pick here, say goodbye to them because they're going to get their hero moment and go out.
And it was an awesome hero moment. I told Harding in her questline to embrace like more than hate and anger, to embrace like all the spectrum of emotion of like the love that the Titans had as well. Mm-hmm. And so she was in her full like Inquisition gear, and which was really cool. And she was slinging arrows at Gillenane and like really taking it to Gillenane, like really distracting her, doing what she needed to do, and her like whatever it takes. And then at first it's like 2 blows to the gut. I'm like, oh no. And then she falls into that blight pit and it's like, oh no.
Yeah.
Like she's really going to die. And this was like not too long after Tosh and Harding got together.
Yeah.
And it broke my heart. And it broke my heart to see Tosh afterwards because they have just like this really fucking heartbreaking moment when they're like, my mom's dead, Harding's dead. Like, why does everybody I love die?
Yeah.
And it's like,
because Cameron made a bad choice.
Yep.
Because Cameron wanted to protect Griffin Boy.
I didn't know I was protecting anybody.
I know. Yeah.
It's like, that's the brutal thing. It's like, but at the same time, like, I can't imagine making that choice and like killing Hassan because Hassan's just a baby boy. Mm-hmm. He's just a baby Griffin boy, and I love him. I loved. So seeing the culmination of the Griffin's restoration was really cool. I don't think there's a bad choice in that one. Mm-hmm. I don't feel like there's an inherently better one. I think that with the Grey Wardens rebuilding and kind of like redefining themselves, especially after the end of this game, which means the people, like, there's no more Archdragon. There are no more Archdemons. There's no more, like, the Darkspawn, if they tunnel underground, they're not going to find any more Archdemons. The Archdemons are all gone. So, like, what does that mean for the Wardens going forward? And so, like, there's a new definition of, like, what it's going to mean to be Wardens. This is a very interesting way of looking at, like, okay, well, with the Griffins, how are they going to rebuild? And what are they going to rebuild towards? Like, what is going to be the goal? The Blight has always been, like, the greatest evil. And so Wardens set aside everything to deal with Blights. Like, whatever your nationality was, whatever your class was, the entire idea that no matter what you were before the moment you become a Warden, you are a brother and sister of the Order. Doesn't matter if you were a peasant, doesn't matter if you were a thief, doesn't matter if you're a criminal, doesn't matter if you're royalty. When you join the Wardens, you are just a Warden in the eyes of the Wardens. And you're like, it's above nationality, it's above religion, it's above everything. And so, like, when you don't have that Blight anymore, what is it about, like, cleaning up the Blight? Is it about pursuing the Darkspawn wherever they are? Like, is it more of a crusade now of, like, you know, we're not dealing with a new Blight, a new Archdemon. What does that mean for us going forward? I'm curious about that. And now we're in spoiler mode, so I'll tell you, we don't get a good definition or explanation of that. It's kind of shitty. But we'll keep going on major choices.
I feel like that's one of those things of like, oh, if they are going to try and turn this into like a new trilogy or something like that. Yeah, you'll see, you know, or you'll help make choices in the future game of like, how are the Grey Wardens going to, you know, play out and all that stuff. Yep. So like, I wasn't bothered by like, oh, the open-endedness of some of those things here.
Well, to be fair, there's still because of the actions of the Elven gods, there's a shit ton of Blight still.
Sure. Yep.
Like there's Southern Thetis blighted to hell.
Yep.
So like there's plenty of work for the Wardens to do if they're just like, we're just going to be cleaning up Blight going forward.
Yep.
Fucking poor Denerim and everywhere else, and I mean, it's bad.
Just in this game, Treviso and Minrathous are both, you know,
blighted to hell.
The end. Especially, maybe if you save Treviso in the beginning, maybe it's just Minrathous gets really fucked up blighted. I don't know, but
is it always Minrathous at the end? I didn't know if they.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay, I didn't know if they swapped it over depending on what city it was.
I don't think so. I think it's always about like that's where they need to go because it's basically it's. I mean, it's Solus going back to or needing to go back to like the scene of the crime, basically from the beginning of the game. So,
well, the beginning of the game isn't. You're not in. It's Arlington Forest, but anyway, yeah, I know what you mean.
You're in Minrathous, and a gate takes you to wherever you need. Like
sure,
like the game opens in Minrathous and it closes in Minrathous. I'm pretty sure.
That's fair.
Anyway, the next item I want to touch on, not a choice that you make or anything like that, but we both talked about how, despite it kind of being an overdone trope nowadays, we were both taken aback a little bit by Varric having been dead the whole time, kind of thing.
Yeah, and also replaying it and getting to the point where Harding walks in on the infirmary and doesn't mention Varric at all. I'm like, they should have picked up on that earlier.
I played enough in my second run of like, and it was, I mean, like even playing through it the first time, and there will be a lot of moments where like, you know, there will be allusions to like, we've already lost so much, and it's like, oh, you're clearly talking about Varric. Now that I know you're clearly talking about Varric kind of stuff. But the game does a great job of like, like, as I said, as soon as I went into that like the prison that Solus traps you in, and you are grieving the loss of your party member, whoever has just been kidnapped and blighted, be it Nev or Balara. You picked Nev, I picked Balara. Like they're in there too, and their status is unknown. You don't know if they're alive or dead at that point. But yeah, like while I'm hearing Varric's voice in there, I'm like, oh my god, they're gonna give me a Varric's been dead this whole time. And so like I put it together about 5 minutes before the game like lays it out there. But like as I'm playing through and like getting into that moment, I'm like thinking back through all those interactions, because it was definitely at the forefront of my mind that like Varric was such a non-figure for so much of it. Like
I was weirded out by it.
He would come in by like the big conversations, but everything else, like it was always pretty much like he would say something to Rook and then I'm gonna go lie down. Like I'm still pretty beat. And so I'm like, he's been really beat for like the last, few weeks or whatever, however long it's actually been, in game time or whatever. I was like, the fact that there was never like, oh, I can go check in and Varric will have something to say. It was like he was just always there in his little room,
nobody ever interacted with him ever.
Yeah.
That was another thing too. I was like, I feel weird that Harding's not like talking to Varric at all.
Yeah.
I just thought they were like, yeah, Varric's here, whatever. I was like, okay, that's weird that you guys made that decision, but
like it's the thing sense. Where they have him in the group conversations at the big moments, and you don't realize that like, oh, he's saying something that only Rook is hearing, or like that Rook he's saying something that's going to prompt Rook's response to the team, and it's really like I like the end bit of like I chose you because you knew all those things to say, and you like, yeah, you needed me in your head to to push you there, but like that was all you, kiddo.
Yeah,
kind of stuff. Like I thought that was a good job, and it was one of those things. Like I went into the game, especially from like all of the preview footage, I went into the game fully expecting, oh, Solus just killed Varric in like
that's what I thought
at the end of that scene.
Yeah, because I remember the E3 stuff or the
exactly
game,
yeah. So when like he wasn't dead and he is there recovering, I'm like, oh, this is okay. I fully thought he was dead, and so for them to do that kind of like
pretty sure they stabbed him in the fucking heart with that dagger, but okay.
Yeah, that was exactly. I was like, oh, that didn't seem like something he was going to survive, but okay, he's here, and like the clever cutting away and like. You see whatever party member you didn't bring with you is kind of like walking along while you're getting, drug out because you just got your head, your clock rung. At
first it's like, oh, they tried grabbing Varric's body, but then they left it there.
Yeah.
Watching it the second time, I'm like, this is the clue. I don't see Nev in this case dragging Varric's body anymore.
Right. Yeah.
And I picked up on that this time. I was like, it was right there in front of you the whole time, but you don't want Varric to be dead because Varric's your leader.
And they do they also give you like Solus deliberately kind of like tweaks your brain a little bit using his connection to you to like hide to mask that truth from you.
Mask that truth so that he could be there influencing you. That's the crazy part. It's like, oh, every time Varric was talking, it wasn't just Rook in his head. It was also Solus planting something there. But Varric said it so you can trust it.
Yeah.
Once again, it's the god of deceit, it's the god of lies. Like,
yeah,
this is the lie that's in front of you the whole time, and it's the lie you don't want to know the truth of because Varric is supposed to be this veteran leader who's supposed to be leading you. And the fact that it's like, no, it's all Rook. And it's like, cool.
Because it was also this whole like, it was weird that like, not only are you barely ever interacting with him at the lighthouse, he also has this like omnipotent narrator thing as you are like doing each of your party members like quest things and like, okay, you've just done the first bit of their quest and here's what you didn't know. And like, it's like, oh, here's the big bad of this quest that's getting like introduced in this little like, mosaic cutscene thing with Varric voiceover. And it's like, we've been accustomed to a Varric voiceover from the last couple of games that it just kind of like is there as like, oh, that's what we expect. And so yeah, it was a fun. I appreciated that like they managed to get me.
They hoodwinked me,
but in a way that didn't feel like they cheated me or anything like that. It was like, yeah, like I knew something was off. Like something about me constantly kind of having that in the back of my mind was like, something about this is weird. This is like a weird Varric dynamic in this game. So I appreciated that, like, yeah, I wasn't crazy. It was a weird Varric dynamic.
Also, the fact that Varric very much in the last, like, one of the first decisions you have to make is you tell Varric whether or not he should be, like, should he try to reach out to Solus. He's going to regardless, but that is a thing that, like, if you're like, you shouldn't do that. And he goes, well, I have to try. And he does it. Afterwards, it's like, he's still always just like, well, he sees himself as a hero. And a lot of, like, that's the stuff that you hear from Varric right before right after you find out he's dead, and also before he goes to confront Solus. At no point is that mentioned throughout the middle ground, because Solus doesn't think of himself as, like, even though internally he wants to be the hero, if he's the bad guy, it justifies all of his bad choices. And so, like, there's the whole dynamic of, like, Solus pretending to be Varric, or rather just, like, letting the Varric kind of, like second personality, or like the quote unquote ghost of Varric in Rook's mind.
Yeah.
Letting that play itself out with, like, him giving input is different than when you meet him in the Fade in the prison, and it's different from when you start the game.
Yeah.
That's something I picked up as well afterwards. I was like, after restarting, be like, he's different in the first and last time we see him than the time we see him in the lighthouse, where he is passive and, like, very much just, like, trying to stay out of the way, etc. Like, that's not Varric's style.
Yeah.
So that was, like, the send off for Varric was really sad. I felt like it could have been more sad if we had more time with Varric as, like,
I mean, did you go to his bed after that sequence? So you go and you, like, find his jerkin or whatever.
Yeah.
And being like, oh, yep, he's like, this room has been empty the whole time.
Yep. You see the busted Bianca on the nightstand.
Yeah.
And it's like, yep, when Bianca was destroyed, so was Varric.
Yeah.
It was very much that.
Which is what, like, that again, that was seeing that in the promotional stuff that they put out, you know, some of the first stuff they put out about this game. I was like, wow, yeah, you're totally, you know, foreshadowing that Varric dies here. So then it was just weird that, like,
he didn't.
He did. No, he really did.
Yeah, I think they did a great job of, like, hiding that in just the right ways.
Yeah. And
like,
it's one of those things that is fun on a replay to be like, oh, yep, here's where Varric's absence is much more pronounced when you know the truth, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
But
then we get into kind of the end game stuff, and I believe both of us had pretty much the same ending in terms of, like, none of our companions died.
Yeah.
We made the right choices. We had gotten everybody up to honor of the Veilguard. We'd gotten all the factions up to 3 stars. So we both had, like, the best possible ending, basically.
Yep.
Where
Even we did the I almost said Min Rathis, but it's the what's her name? Mythal. The Mythal. We did the Mythal side quest.
Yeah. You did it after you all already fought, like, the Blight Dragon in there. Whereas I did it before, and both of us basically talked our way out of a fight with her. And I mentioned to you after we wrapped last week that if you talk to her and kind of get the, you know, power of Mythal first there, and then go and do the big blighted dragon fight in the crossroads, she comes in dragon form and basically takes out a chunk of the blighted dragon's health. So it gives you, like, a leg up. You basically only have to take out, you know, 75% of his health instead of the full 100%.
That is, I think, the hardest Blight Dragon fight.
Yeah, it's like a level 50. Yeah,
that's the hardest one. The second hardest one is the undead one that you get if you have been doing the the mysterious voice quest line from I keep on thinking Narcissus, but it's Narassus or Nasaris.
I don't know
the country Emmerich's from.
Couldn't tell you.
Yeah. Pull it quick.
Navarra?
Navarra, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, you get that in Navarra. It's a Navarra quest line where you're going to the other places and you're finding like Venatori that like are basically been trying to summon him, and you eventually like release him, but he possesses a dead high dragon. Mm-hmm. And so you have to fight this undead high dragon, and it's very cool. It's a really cool fight. He summons, like partway through the fight, he summons undead skeletons to fight for him, and it's a really rad fight.
This sounds familiar. I don't recall anything particular about it, but I did. Did you get like the secret like post credits sequence?
Yes, I did.
Yeah.
Oh, well, let me put this out here. Mine was bugged.
Okay.
It like skipped it on me. And it gave me like, it made it look like I was reset back in the lighthouse for a second before it like crashed. So I looked it up online and watched it.
Okay. Yeah. Whereas, yeah, if you find the 3 orbs around the world wherever they are, and it's like some question mark, like some voice is, talking to you through those orbs. That's basically like you've taken out these sources of power to make way for me in the next game or whatever. And it's like, okay, I didn't realize I was like consciously doing that or whatever. So that was one of those things, like when I finished the game was like, I don't think I missed anything. I feel like I did all of the stuff. So like, what are the trophies I'm missing? And sure enough, that one popped in the post credits thing. And then there were just a few things I had to go and do after the fact. Couple of them, like one of them was like, oh, you can go find the flowers in the Ice Grey Warden area. And then like, once you've found all 3, you go fight where you did one of the dragon fights, and there'll be like a spirit there that you can like give flowers to put them to rest, and that gives you a trophy or something. That was like one of the 2 or 3 that I was missing and just needed to go and do some cleanup on.
Yeah, there's that. Another thing, so about those mysterious voices, this is a interesting thing. There's been a lot of tinfoil hat theories about this group of people for a long time. The Executioners. They are from east of Thetis, I believe. They have a side quest on the Inquisition war table, and they are very much a mysterious like organization / culture or whatever. And they've been hinted at kind of like being a new external threat. A lot of people, especially after Inquisition, thought like the Kunari invasion was going to be like the big threat that you had to deal with in the next game, only for it to not be the big threat. It was part of the bigger threat, but it was a smaller part because it was also dealing with the Kunari like Antom rebellion and stuff like that. So it kind of like sideswept that out of the way. But like, there's always been I believe there's also even like lore pieces from Origins and Dragon Age 2 about the Executioners. What's beyond Thetis has always kind of been like a big question mark, because there is west of Thetis. People have tried to explore out there. Ships do come from west of Thetis, but any Thetis people who've tried to go west, like they shipwreck. It doesn't work out for them. And so it has been like a thing for a long time, like what is outside of Thetis, the like continent that you're on in these games. And also knowing that the Kunari came from the east, and so did humans. Humans also came from outside of Thetis. Thetis as a continent was dominated by the elves, and then the humans showed up and started the Divinum Imperium. And like, that's a whole part of the history of Thetis, is because humans weren't made by the elven gods, as far as we know. They just showed up, and then the Kunari showed up after them. And then we find out a lot more info about the Kunari and like especially with fire breathers and the history of the Kunari fleeing to the west. So we get more info about that, and the Executioners seem tied into that as well now. So that's cool.
So since I don't care about any of that lore stuff,
sure,
but I want to jump off of the Kunari and Tosh in particular, because I think the last time we talked, you had not finished, like you were going into like the 3rd act of Tosh's questline stuff. Like, they had just had the dinner with their mother, and their mother was like, I don't know what to do, I'm leaving. So how did you think that that quest line played out?
Weirdly true to what it means to lose a mom. A lot of like unspoken things.
God, I hadn't even factored in that in terms of like
the dead mom stuff,
your trauma.
Yeah. A lot of like stuff that's left unsaid. I do love that. Tasha's mom at the very end, them.
Yep.
Made sure that Tosh knew that their mom had accepted them and like loved them. And that mattered more to anything. And I think that's the whole thing about Tosh's mom is Tosh's mom left the Qunari to give Tosh a life outside of being an Antom soldier and a berserker. And like I mentioned it last week, Tosh's mom was not a priest and caregiver. Tosh's mom was a historian. And their mom being a mom, all of a sudden being like raising a child was not something that Tosh's mom was taught to do. Tosh's mom did not, quote unquote, have the natural instincts of a mother, according to Qunari culture. And so Tosh's mom did the best that they could, or did the best that she could for them. And seeing Tosh's mom do a full acceptance right before Tosh's mom sacrifices herself is enormous and like broke my heart. Mm-hmm. But Tosh's conversations afterwards are like, we're never going to settle that fight. We're never going to deal with this stuff. I just have to live with it. And the Qunari concept of like living under your bounds or like living under your binding, so to speak, the ropes aspect of the Qunari culture, what these ropes represent, and how Tosh went from seeing them as leashes to seeing them as like the burden that one has to carry in life. While at the same time, I had Tosh embrace their Ravani culture, the culture they were raised in, and seeing Tosh kind of carry forward the lessons that their mom taught them about the Qun and the responsibilities one has to what it means to be Ravani, what it means to be part of this much more colorful and lively culture is a very cool way of seeing how Tosh honors both, but embraces one over the other. I'm very curious what a Qunari, more reliant Tosh is like, of like seeking solace within the Qun rather than seeking solace of Ravani, as part of like their identity and what happens there. I'm curious about how that happens because I really hope that it doesn't mean that they stop being a they, them, because that's who they truly are. And I don't know if they would or not. And I'm curious because being part of the Qun means you're accepting a binary life, even though the quote unquote forward thinking of the Qun, which is, your gender is decided by your job. So it doesn't matter what sex you're born with, your gender's society, like it's a societal construct, and the Qunari double down on that. But what does that mean when you don't see yourself as one or the other? And that's why I mentioned last week, Tosh's story is so unique and interesting and like lore important because non-binary people exist. And like I think that I mentioned last week, the bigger problem that I had was like, there's not an old word for this. So we are using a modern term for it. And like my issue is not that they're using a modern term. It's that my issue is that in the past, we didn't have people using an old term for non-binary person. So we don't have one to use. My problem is with history. My problem is with people back in the day, not having that so that we can use it today. That's the problem. Because there were non-binary people back then. There were trans people back then too. Like there's always been, it was way easier to transition back in the day because all you had to do was move 10 miles away, wear different clothes, and nobody was going to be bothered by it.
Yeah.
The same thing, like it used to be way easier to be gay back in the day. Like, I mean, like way, way, way back. Because I was just like, oh yeah, those two guys live together. Do you think they're, how dare you go to the church and repent for your nasty thoughts of thinking what other people do in their bedroom?
Well, I remember growing up and learning about my Uncle David and his roommate and not knowing until I was, well into my teens
that they were boyfriends.
What that meant. Yeah. Like that was how even 30 years ago, that was like how it was talked about in, public kind of stuff. So.
Yep. And they were roommates was a real thing that people lived with. But yeah, so like as far as Tosh's story goes, it ends in a very like beautiful way. I found out because I had Tosh engage in the Ravani culture, a spirit medium was used to translate the Q, which was cool because they brought in a Qunari spirit that is from before the Qun, which was cool. Like That's a really cool note that it's like before even the Qunari existed before the Qun. And like their connections to dragons were existent before the Qun. So like the way that we got deeper into Qunari culture even was awesome as hell. I love that.
Yeah.
And for it to be like the fire breathers, like don't trust anything not written in fire, which I'm like, that's very interesting. Is there any Qun cultural things like the religious Qunari Qun stuff that is written in fire? Are we going to find out more about like the original Qun? That because they didn't have fire breathers at the time, or they didn't have fire breathers leading them. Remember, they turned the fire breathers into berserkers, not scholars, not, so there's no way that a Qunari like scholar is going to be a fire breather and also being able to read like the true origin or the true words. So they're going to trust it on paper, which will be altered over time. So smart, so cool. Especially since we see the executioners. By the way, the executioners I do not feel are like some phantoms that hovered around Logain and being like, ooh, like you should betray Kaelin. What I believe they did is they planted evidence. In the Return to Ostergard DLC, you find a letter that is suspicious. It's strangely suspicious, but because you find it in King Kaelin's camp, but it seems weird because it's not mentioned anywhere else. But it's a letter detailing Kaelin divorcing his wife Anora, Logain's daughter, to marry the Empress of Orlais, which is like a weird stretch and didn't make much sense with like Kaelin's character, especially like with people saying Kaelin has been in love with Anora since he was a kid, since they were children. Like it didn't really match up. And now my thought is like, did they plant that letter, have Logain find out about it, so Logain betrayed Kaelin, like that gave him the extra motivation to betray Kaelin? We answer the question, who told Varric's brother about the idol in the underroads? Or in the deep roads? We never had an answer to that question. We just know that he found out about it. Now we found out who told him about it to set up the things. Also, who told Meredith that, hey, you want to get this idol. So she gives the money to Varric's brother to get the idol, then takes it from him. Like there's a really cool setup going on with that. Doesn't seem like they had much to do with Inquisition, which is fine because that is combobulated enough.
You got to find somebody who likes talking this shit more than I do.
Oh,
I'm just rolling my eyes on so much of this.
This is the last one here. This is the cool thing. We find out who told the Devinter Magisters about like how to break into the Fade, and that released the Blight. So there's some interesting stuff happening all throughout that. It's very cool. I'm very for people who are like, oh, it just feels like they're setting up another big bad. It's like these people have been there. And they're confirming these people have been around for a while and manipulating and like putting their fingers in all these pies. So it's very cool. I'm very interested about the future of Dragon Age because of this.
Tell me about Lich Emric, because I did not go with Lich Emric.
Lich Emric is so
cool. Thought, the fact that we had just gotten Manfred to start talking was too endearing to let him sacrifice himself and not make the effort to bring him back.
Sure.
Especially because as we found out, both of us created the same stupid ritual without talking to one another about every time we would like leave the lighthouse, we'd go find Manfred first and we'd play a couple of best 2 out of 3
rock, paper, scissors
with him.
Yep.
Just that was my favorite thing, like discovering that we both
did that. Yeah.
Completely like without any kind of like discussion or anything like that. It was just
I'm not gonna lie, Manfred won quite a few. Manfred was real good at rock, paper, scissors.
Yeah. I mean, I don't like that it doesn't give you a chance to like actually make the choice. So it is just whatever, canned animation they're going to play at random.
But when you lose as Rook, your Rook goes like, it's like, I lost. Okay.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
It's good. I also the way that Manfred and my Rook would like look at each other when it was a draw and be like, we go again.
Yep.
It was so cool. So Lich Emric, yeah.
So just in general, I want to touch on the Emric stuff. I liked going in. I liked the different vibes that like the companions and their associated quests gave. Like whenever I was doing stuff with Nev, I felt like, all right, me and Nev are like noir detectives here in Minrathous,
yes.
In Docktown. We're making the rounds where, I'm the heavy, she's asking the questions, whatever the case. And I loved how like from the jump, because he's a necromancer, all of the Emmerich stuff was like so B-movie horror kind of stuff.
It's so good.
And like, all right, here's the mansion where, mysterious, curse stuff had been happening hundreds of years ago or whatever. And
The Blackthorn Manor.
Yeah.
Perfect name too. Blackthorn Manor.
Yeah. So yeah, I loved all that stuff. And just the sequence of events that you like that just play out there. Like, of course it's going to be like a crazy spooky party where like all of the who's that this person knows are going to be there, and nobody's going to think anything's amiss.
The main villain is a schlock movie horror villain.
Yeah. And it was like the weird, like when she gets introduced, I was like, is Manfred like, because like one of the things that stands out about Manfred the whole time is like his goggles, like the very particular goggles that he has, and then she has basically the same goggles, and I'm like, did Emmerich create Manfred as like an homage to this old friend of his? I never found any dialogue to like confirm that or anything.
Or any
like
codexes. Yeah, I don't recall finding any codexes about that. But
I'm specifically saying I never found dialogue because I didn't delve into the codexes.
And I'm confirming to you, I found nothing in codexes about it either. So I don't know.
So yeah, it was like it certainly seems telling that they have the same like eye look.
Well, when she takes off the goggles, she has like empty socket eyes, and so I think Manfred probably also has like glowing empty sockets, and so wears the goggles to like cover up that. That makes sense to me.
Yeah,
like the goggles work for that purpose, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Anyway, I loved all the B horror stuff. But
So
yeah, when
with Mr. Vincent Price.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the very dapper Vincent Price necromancer in your party. And I mean, he certainly like probably my least like character that I was like least engaged in among my party just in general. It was probably him or Davern. I just didn't care too
Interesting.
much about
Those
the
were my
two of
main
them.
two homies. I rolled with those guys the most.
I mean, like I still like I got everybody, like nobody was below level 9 in terms of like their camaraderie stuff, because I was constantly mixing and matching, and I loved that so many of them had like different pairings and different dialogue things, and conversations would evolve over time when you'd go out with them more and more. But yeah, it was just like I was from a mage perspective, I was much more interested in having Nav or Bell around.
Makes
for
sense,
things
because you weren't a mage. I was a mage, so it was like having too many mages can be a problem when none of us can deal with anybody like charging in and like fucking up our day.
Sure. So yeah, having and on the Davern front, I was just like, I would rather have Tosh out there as like my heavy.
Sure.
But yeah, I still, I mean, like, still enjoying the absurdity of it all, and the parts of the mission that were just going around and like laying flowers and like learning the rituals of the Mornwatch stuff.
Yep.
And like meeting his parents or whatever. It was just like, okay,
That's probably a sweeter thing if you romance them.
Sure. Yeah. And that was another thing. I was like, I'm not gonna do a May December romance here. Maybe he's not super old. But
turns out that from doing data mining, they found out that your rook is supposed to be like in their early 30s. So
sure.
And he's only in his like late 40s, so it's little May December, but not.
He
too
definitely
much.
feels older, probably because of the gray and just immediately like Vincent Price and the associations I have with that.
Or maybe he's supposed to be older. I know Morgan is in her 40s. They confirmed that for sure.
She can't be in her 40s after 3 games, or after like
she was in her early 20s in Origins. Wasn't in 2, and 3, which takes place like 10 years after Origins.
Okay, I thought like it's been 10 years kind of in each game. Was my understanding of the timeline, but also I don't give a shit about the lore and the way that you do.
True. It's also to people who are like, why isn't she so hot anymore? And it's like, my guys, she's 40. She's in her 40s. She's super hot for being in her 40s.
I was gonna say I'm not even gonna get into the age stuff. I'm like, she's like an immortal witch now because she's got the essence of mythal in her, which was one of those things that I think I touched on, especially when you go into the Schrodinger's Thetis bit of like, did this Morrigan have a kid? who knows? Who cares? Did this Morgan?
It doesn't matter to
turn
Rook.
into Flemeth. What did this Morgan do in the past? It doesn't matter, because at the end of the last game or post last game, she still got Flemeth's essence of Mythal. Okay,
Yep.
so basically, like everything that like Flemeth wanted for Morrigan, all those years ago, still came to pass, despite how much my Morrigan fought against it.
Well, my Morrigan fought against it too, but the whole thing about it, because in Inquisition, my Morrigan did care so much about being a mother.
I mean, she hasn't been that's the thing, is like she hasn't been your Morgan in 20 years kind of thing.
For sure, yeah, no.
So yeah.
100%. Also, they're like, yeah, by the way, your warden's so in love with, my warden was so in love with Morgan. He's like, I'm going to like do everything I can to make sure I never get the calling, because I'm going to spend all my days with my family.
Yeah.
Which means a lot as a Tabris who like, I could go super deep into it, but I'm not, because it doesn't matter to the Veilguard. Spoilers.
Yeah.
Yeah, the entire...
Anyway,
yeah.
Let's just go back to Lich. Lich Emmerich. Was Lich Emmerich like, because I did not see or experience Lich Emmerich.
So the thing that happens and the decision that...
I just didn't like, I was like, that's such a cop-out to like actually give him his like immortality, because it like, I really like the idea of like a necromancer whose biggest fear is, or who has an extraordinary fear of death.
Yes.
Compared to like a lot of other people. I was like, so for me, the the natural culmination of his arc was accepting that he will die someday, but he can pass on life through Manfred or through his through others or whatever,
his scholarly work and whatnot.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that's fair. With helping Emmerich fulfill his career goal, basically, of becoming a Lich, is an interesting process, because the decision to not bring back Manfred is more of and I compare it to one of the biggest trials people have when they enter Buddhism, is they have to spend time creating a sand art piece, basically. I forgot what it's called, but essentially they use different color sands. They do this entire thing where they make this illustrious, gorgeous piece of art in the sand.
Why is Mancala the word that's coming?
Mancala, that's the game with the
that's
gems
the game,
or like the stones.
Yep. Nope.
From Africa. It is a ritual that they do because after they've put time and sweat and effort into creating this work of art, their last step is to destroy it.
One letter off. San Mandala
Yeah.
versus Mancala.
Yeah.
So yeah, a D instead of a C.
Yeah. This
At
entire
least my mind was in the right place.
It was. You were in the right place for it, for sure. But the entire idea of this, like, you're putting so much effort into something, bringing Manfred to life, like bringing the skeleton, letting a wisp grow and change and evolve as sort of like this thing, and then attaching yourself to it, seeing yourself as a parent to this thing, being able to let go of that is also on the equivalency of being able to let go of your own life. When the Lich process that you see Manfred go through, that you see Emmerich go through, Emmerich dies. He goes through a type of death where they do a very ceremonial of going through a veil. He goes through a set of doors that act as his veil. They do the ceremony of death. So Emmerich, in a way, does die, but he enters undeath. He enters a secondary, longer life. But that also comes with responsibilities. And it's made very clear that this is not something that he is guaranteed to succeed at. Mm-hmm. He could fail and either become a demi-lich or just die in the process. So it's a risk and a gamble for him no matter what. And that means being okay dying as well. Knowing that this is a step that no matter whether you're living your full natural life or you're entering a quote unquote unnatural life, you still have to make that next step through that veil. And so bringing back Manfred and doing all of that, I see that as like a very cathartic thing. It's very much like the emotional thing to do. But when you look at Emmerich, his trauma, his past, his goals, and what it means for him to serve as a member of the Morn Watch, the fact that he was orphaned and then found purpose throughout his life, but has always been held back by this one thing, his extraordinary fear of death. And coming to terms with that through Manfred also being like, Manfred was a spirit who came and experienced the world in a way that is it's groundbreaking for his entire like research. But also being able to let go of Manfred, to not rebind him to new bones and everything. Like there is a sort of acceptance of the things you can control and the things you can't control that are kind of Emmerich final lessons that he needs to know before he accepts Lichdom, because Lichdom is not control over life and death. It's guardianship over Navarra and its culture and its people. And there is these quote unquote dread lords, like these dread necromancer lords, lich lords, are not these nefarious evil rulers. They are meant there to guide and care for society. And the way that Navarra takes the idea of death, because they don't burn their dead, they bury them. The sanctity of death is very special to them. And a lich is meant to be an eternal guardian and watchman and guard of the Morn Watch for time and all eternity. And so there's very much a sort of sacrifice that he's giving. He's giving up eternal rest. And so that's made very clear when you're getting ready for those, that next step for him to become a lich. And it's weird, this kind of sanctity and purity that this lich decision has in any other fantasy game. The lich is the evil choice, right? The lich is I'm evil. Or this is the evil decision. It's against life and death. The natural cycle. A lich, becoming a lich is considered a sacrifice one takes to so instead, being able to guide Navarra properly and guide people, and take care of the spirits that can't move on. Hauntings are a big part of the Navarra Mornwatch quest lines that you have for the random quest, not random, the specific quest they give you is about settling those things. And that's part of the Mornwatch's duties. And part of the Mornwatch now branching out from Navarra. Emmerich is the first Mornwatch member to really set up outside of Navarra and is now, so you get jobs that are hey, we know there's hauntings in these places like Minrathous and other places. Go take care of that. Seeing the expansion of the Mornwatch being is a really cool idea and possibility going forward. And as somebody who is able to guide them going forward and how to deal with the outside world, outside Navarra, Emmerich as a lich, as a guidance and maybe being in charge of that process is a very cool idea and prospect for this future. Also, his epic, legendary equipment is his lich body, where he's has this rib cage and chest cavity that's fully empty, and you see the emptiness on his skeletal body, but he has the glamour of his head, and so it's a floating real person's head on top of a skeleton body, and it's really funny, and I dig it. Right. It's super cool. And the scene you get when he's going to announce to everybody that he's now a lich, the casualness that everybody's taking to him is hilarious, especially because it's for me it was post Tosh's conversation about Emmerich and I'm really weirded out by your dead bodies and the fact that you you're the way you treat dead bodies, which was a really cool moment of culturally, yeah, it makes sense. You feel super weirded out that he's using dead bodies this way. It makes sense. And then it's but instead of being two people obsessed with the undead and dragons, let's find things we can talk about that aren't the undead and aren't dragons. It's very particular. So I loved seeing that, but also at the same time, I totally get why. I don't think, once again, with the Griffin situation with the Grey Wardens and Davern's quest line, I don't think there's a wrong answer to this.
Mm-hmm. So since we both picked Minrathous, we did not get a say in the Lucanus quest line around what's he going to do with his cousin. He just puts him in prison, I think. I don't remember what the other option is. Maybe just kills him outright. But,
or maybe he forgives him, I don't know.
Yeah. But we did get to choose how the Shadow Dragons are going to, who they're going to put in charge.
Yes.
Who did you pick?
I picked
Maevaris or Dorian.
I picked my boy Dorian.
All right.
I understand, but the way Maeve was talking about it, I'm seeing a lot of gaps in here. That's a lot of we're going to make it's, listen, we're post the election. I'm not here.
We don't need to go.
Okay.
We don't need to talk any shit. I don't want.
Fair.
I don't want to think about any of that.
Cool. All right, I'll leave that there.
I picked May.
You picked Maeve?
Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong decision on that. I just think that there is going to be a lot more accountability under Dorian. Maeve makes the argument that, well, some of these people, we might eventually get them over, and I'm like, no.
Yeah, for me it was I was open to either one, and then when I talked to like the other people in the faction to see like, what do you think? Like, who do you think? It was kind of their take where I was like, yeah, Dorian's is probably going to lead to more bloodshed than I want. So I that's why I went with Maeve.
I think that's fair. I wanted, like, when he was like, we're going to do a glorious revolution, I was like, with that mustache, I'm on board. Let's go. Tanky, like, communist music playing behind me as I make that decision. Trying
to think anything else. So yeah, we both tell me again how your ending played out with
Solus?
With Solus, yeah.
So my ending was, I kept telling him, I don't trust you, bitch, but like, I'll work with you. No point did I ever give him any quarter. It's like, you already backstabbed me once, bitch. I ain't like, and I didn't trust you when you backstabbed me. I'm definitely not trusting you now.
I was fully ready to go with the like, oh, we've got a fake knife, so yeah, let's absolutely play a trick on the trickster kind of ploy. But then it gave me this option of like see reason with Solus and like the Inquisitor in that final go through, like, because my Inquisitor was very much like, I think he can still be redeemed, like came from a place of, okay, I'll give it a shot. And so my ending was very much like it's not too late for you to do the right thing, Solus. You go be the thing that the Weave need, or the Fade needs.
You become the Veilguard.
Yeah.
For me, it was, I talked to, so my warden, or my Inquisitor wanted to be like we need to stop Solus no matter what. But then that Inquisitor also was like, but sometimes I feel like maybe they're like, I couldn't reach him, but maybe somebody could. But was very much like, I think you're right, Rook. I think we have to stop Solus no matter what. And then in that moment where you're confronting Solus, my Inquisitor came through and was just like, because Solus is like, I'm not going to listen to you. Da, 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 da. Like, you don't know the friends I've wronged, the betrayals I've done. And the Inquisitor shows up to basically just say like, but what if there is a friend willing to forgive? Like, what if somebody you've wronged is willing to forgive you? Which was a very cool moment. So it's after I selected the Mythal option that you unlock by doing the side quest. That is like, so like, listen to me, Solus. And Solus like, no, I can't do it. Like, I don't really know. Like, Rook, you're not the guy to be telling me this. But then the Inquisitor shows up, and that is the person to tell you that. And the Inquisitor just outright saying like, I know you're capable of doing the right thing here, please. And it's the pleading from that and the Mythal stuff that is like the thing that carries Solus over that goal line, gets him into the end zone of being like, okay, I will be the Veilguard and do that, and like thanks Rook, and like does that, and then does the right thing by becoming the Veilguard. That was such a cool option. Part of me wanted to do the thing about like tricking the trickster god, like you said. Like, there's something inherently really good about that, especially if you've had a very like antagonistic relationship with Solus throughout the game, of being like, I don't trust you, you're a trickster, you're a thief, you're a betrayer, like you'll just betray me like you betray everybody else. And then and Solus just comes back at you being like, yeah, I probably will. Stay on your toes, motherfucker. Like, be ready to pivot because I'll be there. And then he does, and it's like, and I told you after we recorded that D+ show, like, curse you and your inevitable, but like your sudden but inevitable betrayal. Like, it's that full on like I knew it was going to happen, but God damn you for doing it. Which was like an awesome experience for my Rook to just be like, I never trusted him before. I don't trust him now. I'm not going to trust him in the future. And then being like, and also being like very much resigned of like, fine, I won't trick the trickster. I'll do the right thing. Yeah. Like, it's very much like my Rook was 100% antagonistic and like ready just to like fight it out with Solus if I needed to. Like, I was like, I'm ready to murder the egg. I'm ready to break this egg wide open.
I was ready to do the red ending, but you gave me the green ending option.
So I did the green ending.
I did the green ending.
Why not? I mean, I did all the side quest stuff. I might as well go with this option you're now giving me.
Yeah.
And the game does tell you, it's like, hey, you finished the Mythal stuff, so this is unlocked for you. And it's like, oh, cool, that's the secret ending. I did it. Cool. And then in the next time, even though I unlock the secret ending, I'll still probably like trick him.
Yeah, there you go.
Because I want to see that ending. Because I just know he's gonna have a sassy bitch moment where he says like where something about like you got like maybe you got me, maybe like I'm just really curious about like what the god of tricksters and betrayal says about being tricked and betrayed. I'm very curious about that. Yeah. Very, very curious.
The one other thing that neither of us had as an option for this one is if your Inquisitor romanced Solus, they'll or she'll join the.
She'll join.
She'll join him in the.
Interesting.
Veil.
I did that for the second one. I'm like she's gonna try it. She's like, I want to save Solus. So I made her for that.
So if you pick the deception ending, you won't get that little little bit. But it's only if you do the true ending or the best ending or whatever it is that. But yeah, if they were romantically involved in Inquisition, they will
enter it together.
Join together. Yeah.
Won't she die in there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
They're I mean, or whatever is going to happen, like they'll be there together, kind of thing.
Okay. Yeah. No. Oh man. No. Like Solus is just like, first off, Solus only will romance an elf. Yeah. You can only romance Solus as a female elf. It's like, so he's homophobic and racist. I'm joking, but not really. He is maybe not homophobic. I don't think he ever said anything. I don't recall him saying anything about Dorian or anybody in the Inquisition.
Yeah, he's just straight.
He's just straight.
He's just not one of the billion bi characters.
What a disappointment of a cis heterosexual male option.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's like racist for sure. He has a lot of opinions about humans in Inquisition.
Sure.
And by the way, out of everybody who like tried to befriend him in the Inquisition, the one motherfucker he's like, I miss is Cole. How did you feel about that? Because I know you hated Cole. The one guy Solus misses out of the entire Inquisition is Cole.
I mean, that didn't surprise me, given that, like...
he himself is a spade spirit?
Yeah. I kept thinking that the caretaker...
Yeah.
Like, I thought the caretaker, for the first chunk of the game, I was like, oh, they brought Cole back as the caretaker.
Oh.
Like, because the caretaker has a big, stupid hat, too. And so I thought it was just
he has Cole, a big stupid fucking helmet, so Cole, of course Cole's back in the game.
I thought it was Cole back in like a spirit form as an ally of Solus's or something like that. Yeah. And also like he has a similar, enough voice, but I looked it up and I was like, oh no, it's different actors.
Different actor, different type of character.
Yeah.
It really, the caretaker is much more like like elven artifact, I felt like, than that, especially with Balara's quest line. You see some of like the elven artifact stuff that you see, and I'm like, oh, it fits that kind of.
Yeah, what'd you do with the artifact? Did you like
destroy it?
You destroyed it. Yeah.
Destroyed it. It's like this is. If there's one thing we've learned about elven history, it's that it was fucked up, and we should take what we can use and leave it behind.
I think I kept it.
Did you? Did she have like the cool
I
like? So. I saw the photo, like the images of her with like the cool like ancient elven armor.
Maybe, I don't know. I wasn't paying that close attention to the cosmetic stuff apart from my own character.
Yeah, no, I was. So, because I looked it up. I was like, what do other outfits look like? Oh, everybody has kind of cool outfits. I didn't care for Davrin's because it felt like a real step down armor wise. Like there's absolutely like no plate on his armor for his for the Grey Warden one. So like I didn't care for that. So I just put him back in the Griffin Tail armor cosmetically because that armor is badass. It's like he's like this big bulky guy, and then all of a sudden they have him like in like general clothing, and I'm like, don't care for this. Mm-hmm. You're my tank. I need you big bulky, my guy. Versus Tosh, who was in the Ravani gear of like that's like just barely anything, and I'm like, but Tosh is Tosh. Tosh, they're just gonna be able to like to rock out no matter what. Mm-hmm. They're Kunari. They can they got the harder skin. Like it's cool. Love that. Loved all of that. It was great. Balara had told her, hey, we got to move on from the past. Like, take what we can from the past of Arlithin and everything. But what we've learned is we were a worse culture than Tevinter Imperium. So also our gods sucked, and our not gods, like the evil gods, also sucked. So maybe we shouldn't revere any of these fuckers, and we should just kind of like move on and make our own way. And I feel like the Veil Jumpers as a faction, especially in like former Tevinter Imperium territory up in the north of Thedas, it's a big deal that they are, that in this game we did not really spend any time in any alienage. So the only elves we saw were like outside the alienage, mostly Dalish elves, which makes sense because like, you know, most elves in the alienages worship the Chantry. It wouldn't have been as big of an impact. They don't know about the elven gods that way. So seeing Dalish elves as a way, like trying to find a new way forward, was a very cool thing with the Veil Jumpers. Although I will say the Veil Jumpers does not sound like an elven faction whatsoever.
Sure.
If you're talking about like modern terminology, nothing says like this has like, there's no historical like comparison here. Like Veil Jumpers, like that's something from like fucking Marvel or DC or something, like an organization from a comic book. It doesn't sound like it's like fantasy to me, but I digress.
Despite the Veil being such a critical part of this.
Yeah, but why are they the Jumpers of the Veil?
I don't. The Veil Jumpers versus Veilguard.
My whole thing was like, I don't like where's the jumping? Like,
I mean, the first thing they're doing when you see them is they're jumping and trying to escape that automaton.
Yeah, but like when I saw the Veil Jumpers are these people like exploring the Fade? Are they hopping the Veil to explore the Fade? Like, that's what I was expecting, and I just didn't get that from them. I was like, there could have been a better name for this. I don't think Veil Jumpers was the right name, but I digress. It doesn't matter.
That's one of those incredibly dumb semantic complaints. Like,
yeah,
it's fine. You've just had time to get used to Antivan Crows, and Shadow Dragons, like, shadows are cool and dragons are cool.
Well, that makes sense because Minrathous is represented, the Venter and Minrathous is represented by the dragon as an icon. And so the idea of the people from the shadows, like the dregs of society rising up, they are not the dragons that people worship. They're the dragons that rise up from beneath, from Docktown and the darker shadows of it. So Shadow Dragons has a good vibe to it from that aspect of it. Initially, I was also in the same vein of that. I was like, I don't care for this name. But when you get into the etymology of it, it makes a lot of sense. Like Bring the Light, a lot of that sort of stuff made sense.
So it sounds like you need to do a playthrough as a Veil Jumper to get all the ins and outs of what's going on.
You know what? That's a good point. I might do that at some point.
There you go.
At this point, though, if I do a third playthrough, I'm definitely going to have to buy my own version and give you back this one. I almost brought it back tonight, but I'm like, I don't know.
Yeah, you did not hand it off to me immediately, so I was like, oh, he probably just is still playing it. And so
yeah, I am.
That was me asking earlier of like, did you start another playthrough to confirm my suspicion?
Yeah, I did. I literally, after I got back to my parents' house from after recording that D Plus show, I literally booted up a new game.
Sure.
It was I'm a Kunari Grey Warden, which I'm really excited to like explore this. Because some of the character options you get as a Shadow Dragon, I'm really curious because you're a foundling. If you're not I don't know if you're a foundling, if you're also a human, or if you're just a Tevinter person. It's very cool. As an elf, you talk to one of the Shadow Dragons, and he says, "Was it like, were you a slave? Like, it was like, no, I got adopted by a Sipario, which is the if you're non-magic people, the Sipario make up the majority of Tevinter, as non-magic users." And so you being your father, your adopted parent was a commander of an outpost and you were found after a battle. And so they adopted you and raised you. And so, one of the fun comments is like, people just kind of assumed that I wasn't one of their kids. I was a servant for their kids. So he's like, so I got away with a lot. And I'm like, that's fun. Also, it says a lot about what you had to give up to become a Shadow Dragon, especially when your name becomes persona non grata in your backstory, which is really, really cool. It delves deep into that. It's just awesome stuff overall.
Yeah. Any final thoughts before we wrap up our spoilercasty thoughts here on Dragon Age: The Veilguard?
Yeah. My final thoughts are on the future of the Veilguard, or the future of Dragon Age going forward. There's and I'll reiterate this also in the shoutouts, but Ken Shepard over at Kotaku wrote a very compelling article about the argument that Rook should kind of be the new Commander Shepard for Dragon Age. The hot potato protagonist hopping that we've done over the last 4 games, like we are at a point now where this is now the detriment of it is what world state do we all get now? How many varieties and variations can you go into? How often can they give nods to stuff through codexes without actually committing to decisions? And a big reason we've been able to do that is because we do have these large gaps. Dragon Age 2 as a game takes place over like 10 years. And it's, from the events of Dragon Age Origins all the way up to the events right before Inquisition is what we get out of that. And so that's an interesting way to spend those 10 years. Then the jump from Inquisition starting right at the end of Dragon Age 2 in that timeline to 10 years after that for Veilguard, we have these large jumps, which allows you to have these gray areas that we can kind of hide the world states issue. But there has to be at some point either you have a come to Jesus moment where you're like, this is the official canon world state and this is where we're going forward. And the answer then becomes like, how do you answer the question of like, how do you honor the choices that people made in previous games?
Yeah, because on that topic, and that was one of the things certainly I alluded to in I think my initial spoiler-free review is like it would be really cool if this Rook just kind of becomes a Rook for a future story kind of thing. Having not seen the bad ending of the game where everybody, including your Rook, dies, or your Rook basically gets sucked into the Veil and becomes
with Solus,
with Solus. So it's like, if they do that, like at least in Mass Effect 2, they were like, okay, yes, everybody can die in the suicide run except Joker, but like that one can't carry over.
Yeah.
Like you got to carry something else over. So it's like, so they would need to do the same kind of thing
and make that commitment. Yeah.
Which is like, yeah. And that's it, especially because the only way to like get that kind of bad ending here is if you just don't do all of the extra stuff with the characters. So you are just innately missing out on a lot of the story stuff. But yeah, it would be interesting to see, okay, do they force that? And if so, well, what if that was your playthrough? Do you have to go through it? And like, how do you carry over the rest of the choices that you wanted to carry over into a future game or something like that? So it'd be interesting to see if they actually do commit to something like that. I think that's another 10 years away before we get a next Dragon Age game.
It's not unfortunate.
They're going into
Mass
Effect. Next Mass Effect, and just the ballooning scope of games has made it that it's going to be forever before we get another one.
That is the unfortunate thing, isn't it? It's like they learned they can't split their team with Anthem and trying to make Anthem and Andromeda at the same time just did not work for them. So coalescing and only doing one game at a time, that is kind of the rough thing about it. And now their next task is another monumental task of like, how do you fix/reset Mass Effect? Yep. That's not I'll be honest, that's a bigger trouble.
What
than,
is that one going to? Because they are going to have to basically say, here's the canon decision we made at the end of Mass Effect 3 for you.
That's a big thing that they're like. I think that's a bigger question of like, how do you deal with a world state? How do you deal with that? Because that's such a personalized trilogy of games that every choice is valid in that game.
Yep.
Except for the suicide run, everybody dying. But yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I think that when you're talking about where we're going forward, I think with Dragon Age, it is going to be that. But I think you're also right. Like, we're not going to have another Dragon Age game for minimum 8 to 8 years. If they bust out this Mass Effect. But like, I don't expect them to do that because it's a for those who are familiar with the literary term, it is a Milanese knot, which is a famous term for about the Game of Thrones author.
Winds of Winter.
Yeah, the Winds of Winter's delayed because he found himself in this weird narrative knot that he figured out how to get out of, but it's altered significantly everything else. So to solve it, he had to kind of blow everything up. And that's why people are like, why is it taking so long? It's like, because every prep work he did doesn't work anymore. So he has to rewrite everything.
Yeah.
That's the thing he's been saying for years. And people are like, I don't believe it. He's not working on it at all. And
Did you watch the recent Make Some Noise where like one of the prompts was
yes.
And Brennan just being like, so here's the thing. I'm rich and famous now, so I don't want to do this work anymore.
Yep. The whole thing, and he's been honest. George R. R. Martin's been honest for years about this problem of like, how do I, like, he worked for several years on trying to figure out how do I solve this Mirror Needs Not problem without blowing up my universe. And then it turns out he couldn't, so he's blown it up, and now he's doing the hard work of rebuilding everything from it.
Yeah.
He says this is worse than when he decided not to age up the characters and do a time skip. Which is a thing. So,
sure.
Yep. So when I talk about the Mass Effect is not going to be solved easily, and needs a lot of thought put into it and where they're going forward with it. And then at that point, do they do another Dragon Age game, or what is the decision on that? It is, especially with how expensive games are, like, it's tough, man.
I mean, at least they're going to get a shot, I guess. If this had bombed in a way that I don't think it did in terms of sales numbers, like this was, it was Anthem, then Andromeda, and then this.
That would have been the nail in the coffin.
Would have been like, all right, EA's just going to finally cut ties and BioWare is going to just be closed. So the fact that like that didn't happen, we probably are going to get that Mass Effect game. But yeah, they might just kind of be like, okay, well, we left some ideas open if we want to come back to, and if we can come back to Dragon Age. Who knows if and when we will, kind of thing.
Yep. My only last thought about it, and this is, I'm just going to put it out here. The massive detraction on this game came at the very end, which is the slideshow that it gives you, without any fucking details, and they spend like 15 seconds on every single decision you made, and gives you just fucking nothing out of it. Like, no catharsis, no, like, satisfaction. It is like a 5-second, like, Dorian's going to narrate this portion. I took over Minrathous, da-da-da. Next. It's like, that's it? That's all you're giving me?
I mean, I've played enough Fallouts to be used to that kind of vibe, so didn't bother me.
This is by far the worst way, like, the worst end slideshow of any BioWare game that I've played. So, except I never finished Andromeda, so maybe that would be the worst one. I don't know.
Maybe. I don't know. I feel like Mass Effect 3 was a tricky end slideshow kind of thing.
Well, I look at the director's cut and I feel very supported from that.
Sure.
Which, like, I've gone on the record by saying the director's cut is like the actual true vision. That's how it should have been.
Yeah.
The original Mass Effect 3 slideshow, fucking garbage. So...
it's even that I was fine with, but because again, for me, these games aren't about like this little epilogue. They're about the 50 hours I put into the experience. It's not like I know the choices that I made. Sure, if you want to say here's the end beat or whatever, here's what this is going. Here's what Belle's going to do back in Arlington Forest, or here's what's going to happen with the Griffins. Okay, cool. I didn't need that. I got the end of that story when I did that quest.
I felt I wanted more, especially if we're not going to get anything for 10 years, like giving like what happens with the Griffins and the Grey Wardens. I fucking want to know. So tell me what happens. Oh, you're not going to? Fuck me. Okay. Fine.
All right. Well, I think we're at almost 2 hours, so we'll go ahead and just kind of call the episode there.
Okay.
Scrap the Wicked and Life is Strange. I mean, the TLDR, Wicked, really good. Life is Strange did not do it for me. And maybe I'll talk at more length about those next week. But yeah, we're just going to go ahead and dive straight into the wrap up. Thank you, Cam, for chatting all of the Dragon Age the Veilguard stuff here with me. I'm glad you ended up checking the game out, considering it was not really high on your list here near the end of the year. You can follow Cameron at revcabot.bsky.social. Anything you want to give a shout out to there, Cam?
Yeah, I want to give a massive shout out, like I mentioned earlier, about Kenneth Shepard, sorry, who did that article about why the Veilguard is poised to basically just have the Rook be the new kind of like this Dragon Age Commander Shepard. I think it's a very great article, and he also has a ton of other articles about Dragon Age Inquisition. So he's awesome. Like, Grand Assault note, like online Twitter friend of mine. So, yeah, overall, like, really great writing on Veilguard overall. But that one in particular, I think, is like a good look of like what could be the potential future to help make the next Dragon Age game work and land.
Cool. You follow me at trevorjstarkey.bsky.social. And I will shout out that D Plus show. This last week, we did our Deadpool and Wolverine episode, kind of making up for when Kim was out with the flu a couple weeks ago. And that'll be our last episode of the month. We're going to take this coming Friday off for the Thanksgiving holiday here in the U.S. If you're celebrating, happy Thanksgiving. If you're not, happy Thursday. And I'm sure there are plenty of episodes you haven't caught that you could go back and watch or listen to if you are looking for something to do come Friday. And then we'll figure out what we're going to do here come December, whether that's kind of keeping up our tradition of holiday stuff or kind of saying, hey, there are other things coming to Disney Plus. Let's just do that stuff, or a mix of the two. I feel like at least the Home Alone tradition should probably continue, even though I don't really want to, because we're at like Home Alone 5 now, which is absolutely gotta suck. But we'll see what's out there in terms of our December programming on that D Plus show. Presumably come back next week for that Nerdy Site show where I will talk about Wicked and Life is Strange Double Exposure, since we did not cover it here. You can follow all of us over at thatnerdysite.bsky.social or go to thatnerdysite.com for all the latest from us. If you like what you heard, please remember to rate, review, like, subscribe, share the podcast with your friends, all that fun stuff. Thank you for listening. As always, stay nerdy and be good to each other.